There are moments in life when everything you believe about your marriage changes before you've even had time to ask a single question. For me, it happened because a hospital called the wrong woman. At exactly 2:17 on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang while I was negotiating the sale of a commercial office building worth nearly $4 million. Normally, I ignore unknown numbers during meetings, for reasons I still can't explain. I answered, "Mrs. Donovan?" "Yes." "This is Mercy General Hospital. Your husband was brought into our emergency department after a minor car accident. We're calling because you're listed as his emergency contact." The world around me stopped. What happened? "The injuries aren't life-threatening," the nurse said reassuringly, "but another woman arrived before we could reach you. She said she's family." I frowned. "My husband's mother passed away 6 years ago." Silence. Then the nurse spoke again. "I'm sorry. She introduced herself as Mrs. Ryan Donovan." "Mrs. Ryan. Donovan. Not Miss, not a friend." "Mrs. I think you've made a mistake," I whispered. "I'm looking directly at the registration form." She replied gently, "The woman told us she's your husband's wife." The call ended less than a minute later. My clients were still talking across the conference table. Someone asked me a question. I have no idea what it was. All I could hear was one sentence repeating inside my head. "She said she's your husband's wife." My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 37 years old, and I've spent the last 14 years negotiating commercial real estate deals. People assume my job is about selling buildings. It isn't. It's about reading people. Every smile, every hesitation, every tiny lie someone thinks they're hiding. If a buyer claims they aren't interested, but they keep asking about the same property, they're interested. If a seller says they aren't desperate, but suddenly accepts a lower offer, they're desperate. The truth is almost never hidden. It's buried beneath confidence. That's why what happened next still haunts me. Because somehow, I never noticed the biggest lie sitting across my own dinner table. Ryan and I met at an open house 12 years earlier. He wasn't looking to buy anything. He'd come because a friend canceled at the last minute. I liked him immediately. He laughed easily. Remembered little things. Held my hand whenever we crossed a street, even after we'd been together for years. When we married, everyone told me I'd found one of the good ones. For a long time. I believed them. We never had children. Not because we couldn't, because life kept getting in the way. Every year we'd promise ourselves, next year. Next year we'd slow down. Next year we'd travel less. Next year we'd finally start a family. Eventually, next year became another anniversary. Then another, until we stopped talking about it altogether. Ryan blamed work. I blamed timing. Neither of us realized our marriage was quietly disappearing while we were busy making plans for a future that would never arrive. After leaving the meeting, I drove straight toward Mercy General. Halfway there, my phone rang again. Same hospital. "Mrs. Donovan?" "Yes." "I'm sorry for the confusion earlier." Relief washed over me. Maybe it really had been a mistake. Then the nurse continued. "Your husband has already been discharged." "Discharged?" "Yes. The woman who arrived with him signed all the paperwork and took him home." My grip tightened around the steering wheel. Did my husband ask for me? The nurse hesitated. "No." One word. That's all it took. I turned my car around before ever reaching the hospital, not because I believed he was cheating, not yet, because something felt wrong. That evening, Ryan walked through our front door carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. "You've been working too hard?" He smiled. "I thought we'd have dinner together." He kissed my forehead, exactly the way he always did, exactly the way a guilty man probably practices until it feels natural. "How was your day?" he asked. I looked into his eyes, the same blue eyes I'd trusted for 11 years. "The hospital called, for the smallest fraction of a second." His smile disappeared, then it came back. "Oh," he laughed nervously. "That! I had a little fender bender. Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't want you worrying." Reasonable, simple, believable. If the conversation had ended there, I might have accepted it. Instead, I asked one more question. "Who picked you up?" He didn't answer immediately. My coworker, Lisa. Not my wife. Not a nurse. Not an Uber. A coworker. Funny, the hospital hadn't called her Lisa. They'd called her Mrs. Ryan Donovan. I smiled. "Glad you're okay." That night, Ryan fell asleep within minutes. I didn't. People think marriages end the day someone discovers an affair. They're wrong. Marriages end the moment one person realizes they're sleeping beside a stranger. At 6 o'clock the following morning, while Ryan was still asleep upstairs, I parked outside the office of the best divorce attorney in the city. I hadn't decided to leave my husband. Not yet. I had decided something else. I was done asking questions whose answers depended on whether Ryan chose to tell me the truth. From that moment forward, I would only trust evidence. Because somewhere in this city, there was a woman who believed she was Mrs. Ryan Donovan, and I intended to find out why. The hardest part about discovering a lie isn't proving it. It's pretending you still believe it. Ryan kissed me goodbye the next morning as though nothing had happened. "I'll probably be late tonight," he said, adjusting his tie. "The office is swamped after yesterday." I smiled. "Drive carefully." "I will." He left. I waited exactly 1 minute before walking into my home office. If Ryan was telling the truth, I'd find nothing. If he wasn't, he'd already left a trail. Unlike detectives on television, I didn't need to follow someone through dark alleys. People expose themselves every single day. They just don't realize their bank statements, toll records, and digital receipts are telling a completely different story. I started with our joint account. Most transactions were ordinary. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance. Then I noticed something strange. Every month, on the third Friday, exactly $2,850 disappeared into the same account. No description, no company name, just an account number. Ryan had never mentioned it. I copied it down. Next came his credit card statements. One purchase caught my attention immediately. A furniture store. Almost $12,000. I couldn't remember buying any furniture. Then another. A children's clothing boutique. Another. A toy store. Another. A family membership at the city zoo. I leaned back in my chair. Ryan and I didn't have children. So who was buying bunk beds, school backpacks, birthday presents, and zoo tickets? By noon, I had built a timeline stretching back almost 6 years. Every month, money quietly disappeared. Every month, Ryan told me he was working overtime. Every month, someone else was living comfortably. But I still had no names, no address, no proof, only questions. Then fate handed me the first real answer. That afternoon, I received an email from one of my clients. Attached was a property appraisal. The address caught my attention immediately. It matched one of the utility payments I'd found on Ryan's statements. I opened the file. 3-bedroom house. Quiet suburban neighborhood. Purchased 6 years earlier. Owner. Ryan Donovan. Not jointly owned. Not hidden behind a company. His name alone. My pulse quickened. Ryan had owned a second house for 6 years, and I'd never known it existed. I drove there before I could talk myself out of it. The neighborhood was peaceful. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. A sprinkler clicked rhythmically across a green front lawn. Then the front door opened. Ryan stepped outside. He wasn't alone. A woman followed him carrying grocery bags. She laughed at something he said. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, ran out behind them. "Dad!" he shouted. Ryan bent down, lifted him into the air, and hugged him so naturally, it looked like he'd done it 1,000 times. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't some weekend romance. This was a life, a home, a family. And somehow I wasn't the wife. I was the secret. I drove away before anyone saw me. That evening, I sat across from Rebecca Lawson, the divorce attorney I'd hired only 24 hours earlier. I slid the property records across her desk. She looked up slowly. "Claire, this changes everything." Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach tighten. Samuel Donovan, Ryan's father's attorney. I had spoken to him only once, at my father-in-law's funeral 3 years earlier. I answered. "Mrs. Donovan?" "Yes." His voice was calm. "I've been trying to reach you." "What is this about?" A long pause. Then he said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. "Before you file for divorce, there's something your late father-in-law wanted only you to know." I met Samuel Donovan the following morning. He didn't invite me to his office. Instead, he asked me to meet him inside a quiet library that my father-in-law had funded years before his death. Samuel was already waiting, a thick leather folder resting on the table between us. "I've been hoping this day would never come," he said. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Your father-in-law loved his son." "I know, but he also knew him better than anyone." Samuel slid the folder toward me. 6 months before he passed away, he rewrote his will. I frowned. Ryan told me everything was settled after the funeral. Samuel gave me a sad smile. That's what your husband believes. He opened the folder to the final page. There was a confidential clause. I stared at him. What kind of clause? He adjusted his glasses before speaking. Your father-in-law believed that if Ryan ever betrayed his marriage, he wasn't fit to inherit the family business. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Samuel continued. He instructed me to keep this document sealed unless credible evidence of infidelity surfaced. I slowly pulled the papers closer. Every signature was genuine. Every page had been notarized. Every date matched. This can't be real. It is. My eyes scanned the final paragraph. If Ryan committed adultery during the marriage, his ownership rights in Donovan Commercial Holdings would immediately transfer to me upon legal confirmation during the divorce. I looked up in disbelief. Ryan doesn't know? Samuel shook his head. No. Why tell me now? Because yesterday, someone anonymously mailed my office copies of property records showing Ryan owned another home. I froze. I didn't send them. I know. He leaned forward. Which means someone else has known about his second life for quite some time. A chill ran down my spine. Whoever mailed those documents wasn't trying to warn Ryan. They were making sure I discovered the truth. Samuel carefully closed the folder. Claire, don't confront him. Why not? Because next Friday is the annual shareholders meeting. I frowned. What does that have to do with anything? He looked directly into my eyes. That's the day this clause becomes enforceable. I walked out of the library holding a secret worth millions of dollars. But the money wasn't what unsettled me. It was one question I couldn't stop asking myself. If someone had been secretly watching Ryan for years, who had sent those documents to Samuel? And why had they chosen now to expose him? For the next 6 days, I lived 2 completely different lives. During the day, I smiled through meetings, signed contracts, and negotiated property deals worth millions of dollars. At night, I watched my husband come home from another woman's house. Ryan never realized anything had changed. He still kissed me goodbye every morning, still asked what I wanted for dinner, still talked about taking a vacation together after the shareholders meeting. The irony almost made me laugh. He was planning our future, while secretly financing another one. Friday finally arrived. The annual shareholders meeting was always treated like a celebration. Executives, investors, board members, even local reporters attended. Ryan stood confidently near the front of the room, greeting everyone with the smile that had fooled me for 11 years. He caught my eye across the room and waved. I waved back. Rebecca, my attorney, quietly stepped beside me. Everything's ready. I nodded. So is he. The meeting began exactly at 10 o'clock. Financial reports, company growth, future expansion, everything unfolded exactly as it had every year. Then Samuel Donovan stood. I have one final matter concerning the estate of the late Richard Donovan. Ryan smiled. My father's estate was settled years ago. Samuel looked directly at him. Not completely. The room fell silent. He removed a sealed envelope from his briefcase. This document has remained confidential until today. Ryan frowned. What document? Samuel ignored the question and handed copies to every board member. I have also received certified evidence confirming that Mr. Ryan Donovan maintained another residence and another domestic relationship during his marriage. Whispers spread across the room. Ryan's face turned white. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Samuel calmly opened the envelope. Under Article 7 of Richard Donovan's final will, all controlling shares of Donovan Commercial Holdings immediately transfer to Claire Donovan. The room exploded. Board members began talking over one another. Reporters reached for their cameras. Ryan stood frozen. What? Samuel placed the signed will in front of him. Your father anticipated this possibility. Ryan grabbed the document with trembling hands. No, this can't be legal. It has already been verified by the probate court. Ryan looked at me. You knew? I met his eyes for the first time in days. I found out exactly 1 week ago. You planned this? I shook my head. No, Ryan. You planned this. At that exact moment, the conference room doors opened. The woman from the second house walked inside. She had obviously heard what had happened. She looked at Ryan, then at the reporters, then at the legal documents scattered across the table. What do you mean? She whispered. You don't own the company anymore. Ryan couldn't answer. Because in less than 60 seconds, He had lost the business he'd expected to inherit, the fortune he'd been hiding, and both women he'd spent years lying to. Nobody moved. The only sound in the room was the clicking of camera shutters. Ryan kept staring at the will as though reading it one more time might change the words. "It was supposed to be mine," he whispered. Samuel closed the folder. "It was. Until you violated the one condition your father believed mattered more than money." The woman Ryan had been living with stepped closer. "So you lied to me too?" Ryan looked up. "I can explain." She laughed bitterly. "For 6 years you told me we'd own this company together." She looked around the room. "You don't even own it." Without another word, she turned, took the little boy's hand, and walked out of the building. Ryan called after them. Neither looked back. Then he turned toward me. "Claire, please." "I never stopped loving you." I held his gaze for a long moment. "I believe that." Hope flashed across his face. Then I finished. "But love isn't what destroyed our marriage." He frowned. "What was it?" "You spent 6 years lying to 2 different women, and somehow expected both of us to trust you forever." His shoulders dropped. For the first time since I'd met him, he had no answer. 3 months later, our divorce was finalized. The board unanimously voted to keep me as majority owner of Donovan Commercial Holdings. I didn't accept the position because I wanted revenge. I accepted it because hundreds of employees depended on the company, and none of them deserved to lose their jobs because of Ryan's choices. The business grew faster than it ever had. Several executives later admitted they had always trusted my judgment more than Ryan's. As for Ryan, he sold the second house to pay mounting legal fees. He resigned from the company his grandfather had built. Within a year, he had disappeared from the business community entirely. People often ask if I ever hated him. The truth is, hate requires energy. And I had already wasted enough of my life on someone who had never valued my trust. Sometimes I think about Richard Donovan, a father who loved his son enough to give him every opportunity, but loved integrity even more. His final gift wasn't the company. It was the chance to stop blaming myself for someone else's betrayal. Because the greatest revenge wasn't taking everything Ryan thought he owned. It was watching him realize he had thrown it all away long before I ever learned the truth.